So I tried something a little crazy. I decided to read 20 books in 30 days. Now, we've all heard that saying, right? Reading changes your life. But what does that actually mean? I wanted to see if a really intense burst of reading could do more than just teach me stuff. Could it fundamentally change the way my mind works?
And this, right here, gets to the heart of it. Of course I expected to learn a bunch of new things. That was a given. But the real story, the part that truly blew my mind, was the transformation that happened on the inside. It wasn't about what I learned, but about how the very act of learning was rewiring my brain.
So why even attempt something this intense? Honestly, it wasn't about trying to look smart or anything like that. The real reason was much more personal, and I bet it's something you can relate to. I felt like my ability to just focus was completely broken.
Does this before state look familiar? My mind was constantly bouncing around. A notification here, a new tab there, just a constant state of distraction. The goal wasn't some grand, complicated thing. It was just to get back to a place of quiet, intentional focus. To be able to sit with one thought without that nagging itch to check my phone.
For this whole experiment to work, I needed a foundation, and it was built on this one, single, non-negotiable rule. No page counts, no timers. Just a simple promise to myself, I will read every single day. That's it. It turns out that consistency was way more important than how much I read on any given day.
Okay, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. After a week or so of sticking to that one rule, something started to shift. And it wasn't just a feeling, you know? It was the first real evidence that my brain was physically adapting to this new habit. It was actually rewiring itself.
And that led to this huge realization. Focus isn't some gift you're born with. It's a muscle, a mental muscle. And just like any other muscle in your body, it gets weak if you don't use it. But, and this is the important part, it gets stronger every time you train it.
So if focus is the muscle, then reading is the workout. It's that simple. Every single time you sit down with a book, ignore the distractions, and just follow one long train of thought. That's a rep. You're literally at the gym for your mind.
Now, to make this whole thing possible, I had to change how I was reading. At first, I was trying to absorb every single word, and it was exhausting. The real breakthrough came when I shifted from reading for sentences to hunting for ideas. It wasn't about speed reading. It was about being an efficient filter for information.
And then the magic happened. Around book 5 or 6, I started seeing it. The same big ideas were popping up in different books by different authors in totally different fields. The dots just started connecting on their own. And that, right there, is the leap. It's when you go from just collecting information to actually building real wisdom.
Okay, but let's be realistic. Reading 20 books in a month sounds like a recipe for burnout, and it would have been if I hadn't built a system around it. So this next part is all about the practical stuff, the framework that made it all possible.
And here it is, the whole system in 4 simple steps. First, I kept the sessions short and focused. Second, I made it a ritual by reading at the same time every day. Third, and this is a huge time saver, I'd read summaries first to make sure a book was even worth my time. And finally, to make sure I actually remembered anything, I'd write down 3 key takeaways from every book.
This might be the most freeing lesson of the entire month. You know that feeling of guilt you get when you start a book and it's just not clicking? Well, I learned to let that go. Your time is way too valuable. Learning to quit a bad book is a superpower.
So, we've talked about better focus, a system for reading, all that good stuff. But the most profound change, the real reward, it had nothing to do with productivity or knowledge. It was something much deeper and totally unexpected.
After 30 days, 20 books, all the notes, all the effort, what was the one thing that stood out? What was the single biggest reward that made the whole challenge completely worth it? And there it is. It wasn't about being smarter or being able to rattle off facts. The ultimate prize was a fundamental shift in my perspective. It was a change in how I felt inside my own head and the lens through which I was seeing the world.
So what does a change in perspective actually look like day to day? Well, it looks like this: a greater sense of calm because my mind wasn't in a constant state of panic, more patience because I was training myself to work through complex ideas, and just being more intentional with my actions because my mind was trained to focus on what actually matters.
So look, the big takeaway here isn't that you need to go read 20 books in 30 days. It's much simpler.
Just read consistently. Even a little bit each day starts that process of training your mind and shifting your perspective in ways you just can't predict. Give it a shot. I promise you'll be surprised by what happens.